Welcome back to Part 2 of our investigation into Declassified FBI File 6283894. By 1967, the federal government had begun publicly shifting UFO research away from the military and toward civilian academic institutions. Dr. Edward Condon was the public face of this shift. He led the University of Colorado study, a government-financed project intended to bring scientific rigor to the UFO phenomenon. While Condon's team analyzed standard reports, the FBI continued to act as a quiet repository for high-strangeness data, intelligence that landed on the director's desk despite defying standard academic methodology. We need to examine the delta between the sanitized research of the public study and the raw intelligence hitting the FBI. The archival record reveals a history of intelligence collection that persisted even as the public was encouraged to view UFOs through a purely academic lens. The 1967 files are too disparate for a single narrative. To analyze them, we have categorized these reports into a distinct taxonomy. 3 primary case profiles appear in Section 10: the close encounter, the psychotronic claim, and the Black Project. The biological category includes physical entities and documented missing time. Psychotronic refers to mental manipulation, while Black Project involves suspected terrestrial engineering. By conducting a comparative analysis of these 3 reports, we can identify how the FBI categorized high strangeness during this period. These case studies illustrate the federal intake process for claims that were considered impossible. A January 1967 memo from Virginia details an encounter by James Collins. He observed a transparent, glass-like oblong object. Inside were undersized humanoids, under 4 feet tall. Strikingly, the memo notes the hyper-mundane detail that they wore standard terrestrial trouser pants and t-shirts. This creates a unique investigative profile: mundane clothing paired with a transparent craft and missing time. The mixture of domestic detail and chronological impossibility was the type of data agents were forced to process. The memo focuses on a specific gap in the witness's memory, an 8-hour period between 8 p.m. and 4 a.m. that Collins could not account for. Collins believed he was transported an undetermined distance and returned to his point of takeoff roughly 8 hours later. The interviewing officer noted that Collins spoke coherently, despite showing signs of emotional strain. This strain contrasted with his total lack of recollection regarding his location during those hours. If you were the agent interviewing this subject, would the mixture of mundane clothing and rigorous temporal gaps influence your belief in their report? In federal archives, these pronounced gaps in memory serve as a primary marker for the biological encounter taxonomy. We move now to the second category: psychotronic claims. A December 1966 secret telegram details a report regarding an individual named W.R. Hanawalt. Hanawalt claimed the existence of a self-abrogating laser or cobalt ray capable of manipulating the central nervous system. The report states this ray could control smell, taste, hearing, sight, and mental sensation. Hanawalt's file categorizes the phenomenon as neurological interference, presenting an alternative to the sky object reports found elsewhere in the same folder. The report describes a physiological cocoon of energy that could be used to manipulate heartbeat and breathing. This 1966 description of a remote influence weapon predates modern public discussions of directed energy by decades. The document ultimately concludes that these spectacular visions of flying objects are nothing more than the faulty visions produced by this invisible energy. If you were presented with this technical description of a remote influence weapon today, would you consider the underlying physics sound? The Hanawalt file provides a classification for cases where the phenomenon shifts from physical objects to neurological interference. The final category in our taxonomy covers terrestrial black projects. A June 1967 memo regarding Paul L. Pyrrell details claims of saucer development dating back to the Second World War. Pyrrell was a Luftwaffe test pilot who claimed to have worked on a secret project in the Black Forest of Austria. He provided specs for a saucer-shaped craft 21 feet in diameter, equipped with jet engines and an exterior thrust ring that revolved around a stationary central dome. Pyrrell's description of a rotating thrust housing stabilizing a stationary cockpit is mechanically sound. Would you classify this as extraterrestrial or simply advanced terrestrial engineering? The Payroll report demonstrates how the Bureau archived UFOs as potential rival state aerospace secrets. The presence of these three categories, biological, psychotronic, and black project, side by side, illustrates the complexity of File 62-83894. These records show the phenomenon was not a single variable, but a collection of diverse and often contradictory reports. The Bureau operated as a records branch, logging psychological trauma and advanced aerodynamics with bureaucratic detachment. These files show what data the government was quietly absorbing while public science was directed elsewhere. We see the institutional habit of processing extreme claims through standard bureaucratic routing and record search requests. The delta remains: the sanitized public research on one side and the raw intake of the director's desk on the other. Section 10 provides a sociological map of what citizens believed and what agents recorded during a peak wave of reports. These records are necessary for understanding the history of intelligence collection